How important is knowledge in Islam? What knowledge do you need to succeed? Is intention enough? This and more. Don't go away.
There is no man more dear to me throughout the whole of history than the one who was sent as a guide, leading people from darkness to light. His message was simple and clear, that there is one God whom we must all fear, inviting people towards Allah. His name is Muhammad Mustafa. His name is Muhammad Mustafa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome viewers to another in our series of episodes named The Ark of Noah. Now we've been discussing a variety of different subjects that's led us and hopefully is going to lead us to the eventual success in our meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've talked about the greatness of this deen, which we all need to appreciate. We've talked about the state of the ummah, the greatness of this ummah and the dangers that face it. We've then been talking about we've developed an idea of the high aspirations and the importance of aspiring in our lives and what we really should be aspiring for based on Islamic teachings of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sheikh Moutasem, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Abdullah.
Sheikh, I want to ask you, now we've developed this idea of high aspirations, where does knowledge fit in defining our aspirations, and how does knowledge fit in with our analogy of the Ark of Noah?
This is a very central question, because high aspirations provide us with the energy, the zeal, the determination, the resolution. It's full with power and potential. Now, potential and energy needs direction. Otherwise, it could be destructive. So, direction comes from knowledge. Knowledge tells us or draws the map for us. So we know where this, or how to channel, where to channel this energy and this zeal, in which direction.
And where does this come in terms of our series we're calling the Ark of Noah? Where does knowledge fit in here in the analogy?
Yes, we try to build a process of appreciating our deen and the great position of this ummah and realizing the threats that could really place all of that in danger. And we talked about how high aspirations, that we should aspire to protect this religion, understand it well and implement it. Now knowledge comes, and this is the time for knowledge, is because we're trying to get on the Ark of Noah, we're trying to get the right, correct understanding of Islam. We want to follow the example of the Prophet ﷺ. We can never do that without correct knowledge.
And as you said, perhaps in an earlier episode, we've got many arcs in front of us, many different paths, many different arcs. Which one are we going to take? And we can realize that. I mean, we're not talking about arcs in terms of outside of the fold of Islam. We're talking about even inside of the fold of Islam. We've got different arcs and different paths that can be taken. Now, what you're suggesting here is that knowledge is the key to finding the right path. Can you give us a little bit more on that?
This, Abdullah, is like when you go to a market and you want to buy, let's say, a device. You want to buy a set of tools. If you're an expert in your field, you know what set of tools to get. You know the quality, and you are ready to pay the price in order to get good quality. If someone doesn't know anything or has no background, has no expertise in the field, they'll go and just buy or purchase any set of tools based on their knowledge. Their knowledge is will be basically very impressionistic. They will see something, if it's attractive, has beautiful colors, okay, this looks good, they buy it. But as an expert, when you see it, you say that this is not the right set of tools.
So this is comparing superficial knowledge, which every Muslim has a small part of knowledge of something of Islam. This is what you're calling superficial.
Yes.
And that is not enough to allow you, in your opinion, to choose the right ark.
Yes, because there are many arcs there. and some of them seem very attractive. But when we develop the knowledge, we know what qualities to look for as we are searching for the ark. So we can tell this is the ark of Noah because we know what qualities we should be getting. It doesn't depend on the shape of the ark. It doesn't depend on the color of the ark. It doesn't depend on how handsome the people on the ark are. It's about the qualities that really matter. Who are on board? Are they the righteous people? In the case of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, we realize this act, something seems like an act of worship. Is that really the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? So when we get the knowledge, we will be able to answer these questions. If we don't have the knowledge, our decisions will be based on first impressions.
Okay, so we've got quite a lot of concepts you brought in there. Let's just break this down. Let's first of all talk about what knowledge do I, as a regular Muslim, okay, let's go back even further. Let's say, I think first it's important to understand who has what knowledge. So we've got to define where we're going with our knowledge. Now, what's the difference between the ordinary worshipper, the student of knowledge, and the scholar? Can you just describe that to people so that people have in their minds, they can reflect what I actually am, and in that case we can look at what level of knowledge we need?
Yes, actually this question hits a nerve because I really have, I think Muslims have a problem with their approach to knowledge, because many times in many circles knowledge has been presented, or people have been addressed according to one level, as if all of them are going to be scholars. But that's not the case.
Especially I think in our when we're talking about people who are keen to go back to the pure teachings, as you're saying, of Islam, back to the Quran and Sunnah, we just seem to say knowledge. You are all students of knowledge, but there's different levels, and there's people who are going to aspire to really the top, and there's people that they have other things, and they have slightly lower aspirations. So where do we fall? How do we divide up these people? How do we know what we are in terms of the search of knowledge?
Yes, simply and basically, some people have a head for knowledge. They have a potential to become scholars. These people have to be taken special. We have to take special care of them and provide them with a very systematic approach to the knowledge of Islam. So we build them to become the scholars of our future. And there are people who are in different fields. There are people in the field of medicine. Some people are engineers. Some people are in education. Some people are in the business world. So these people are having their own contributions to Islam. So we have to tailor for each of these categories the knowledge they really need in order to help them in real life situations get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And are you talking about the job of the Islamic scholars? Is that their job to guide these people?
Definitely. The scholars, among the scholars, there are people who are responsible for teaching, for education. And they have to provide each category among the Muslims with the knowledge they really need. Because each person, when it comes to knowledge, there is a portion of knowledge that is obligatory on them to learn. Because that's the knowledge they need to fulfill their obligation to Allah. They need to learn how to pray. Someone is rich, he needs to know the ahkam or the rulings of zakah. If someone is poor, he doesn't need to know that.
So this is a job for really the big Islamic scholars, because they are the fountain of the knowledge which obviously originates from Quran and Sunnah. That's their job, isn't it?
Obviously.
Let's talk about now, and of course then you have the student of knowledge, and he's aspiring to become a scholar. He's devoting his life to doing that job. And obviously with the breakdown of Islamic society many years ago, this has obviously become blurred now. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to really work out what knowledge do we need. Now, if I'm just a Muslim, I'm busy with my job, my family, and I know I'm gone past the stage of I can't become a scholar. I am in some terms a student of knowledge. I am, because we were in the search of knowledge till we die. But what is required from me? What do I need to know to board that ark?
That's a very deep question, and I really think that we need to understand these points very well. Because, as you said, some people are busy with their job, with making a living, with their families. Each one has different circumstances that they have to handle and deal with. For someone who doesn't have hopes, really solid hope to become a scholar, obviously every Muslim is supposed to be a student of knowledge to a certain degree. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ وَاجِبٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ, that seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim, male and female. So Muslims need to study. But what is the most important fields of knowledge that we really need to learn? If I'm not going to become a scholar in the field of fiqh, in the field of aqeedah, in the field of da'wah and different rulings, what is the knowledge that really helps us?
Which there's nothing wrong with. People have to understand there's nothing wrong with that. It's being realistic about your situation.
It's a matter of prioritization.
And prioritization.
Yes, just prioritize what we really know, how to get maximum benefit with the least amount of knowledge that you can get. And that's a very valid quest for each Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ actually drawn our attention to that. And even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an, the most important knowledge that we need is the answers to the main questions in this life. And they're basically, these are the articles of faith.
Right.
These are the articles of faith. It is belief about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And belief about Allah, knowledge about Allah is the most profound knowledge that you can ever find. Because it's a perfect match with our own nature. This is why Imam al-Qayyim says, for each of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a set of acts of worship. That once you learn this name, it will spark the desire to do these acts of worship. So basically, the whole of Islam, the whole system of Islam is a manifestation or is a project to help us worship Allah through His names. So to me personally, what I see, knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His names, His great attributes, His rights upon us, our relationship with Him, this is the most important knowledge we need to get.
And by His rights on us, presumably you mean the fara'id, the what's compulsory upon us.
Yes. Obviously, the general approach is generally what's Allah's rights on us. And once we start acting upon that, we will need the guidance of the scholars in detailed matters. But I'm just generally speaking, we need to know that Allah has the right that we pray, we fast, we do obligations. This is general knowledge.
Okay.
But how we do the details of these, we can take the guidance simply from the scholars when we need them. So it's very simple.
So you're saying we've got the fountainhead, which is of really Islam, which is the knowledge of Allah, getting to know Allah, your Lord. And then with all of that, we've got the general knowledge, which is compulsory upon us, which is those things that we have to do after we've recognized who Allah is. And beyond that, we can then go back to the scholars, because they are the true holders of the Islamic knowledge. And then we are, because we're not claiming that we're all scholars, but in fact we are going to the people who are specialized for the job.
Yes, definitely. The knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very profound. The more we know about Him, the more our life will change. It gives us direction. And obviously we need some details. We can always get them from the scholars.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheikh. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a minute. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Closing the Gap.
Why closing the gap?
In this program, Sheikh Yusuf Estes and Omar Dunlap are going to discuss how to bridge the gap between peoples of different cultures and orientations, the gap between males and females, Muslims and non-Muslims, the East and the West.
Human beings feel like that they're being slighted one way or the other. The gap between the youth and the elders, the gap between various status in the work field and education, and then trying to provide solutions for these particular problems.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Ark of Noah, in which we've been discussing the importance of knowledge. Now, we've been describing the importance of knowledge, and just before the break we were touching on the fact that there are different people suited to different bounds of knowledge, different limits. We're not all going to become scholars, and I think this is part of the realization that many of us we need to make. Sheikh, we're not all going to become scholars, but what's the importance of contributing in terms of the Muslims to serving the Ummah in different ways?
Yes, I believe that Muslims really need to have some kind of a versatile approach to their contribution to Islam. I understand that some people think that they either become scholars, and if they fail to do that, they won't have a contribution to Islam. I say no, you have to study yourself well, and you have to see if you have this potential to become a scholar, you have a head for knowledge, and you seem to have a bright future as a scholar, and to contribute to this Ummah in this regard, that's a wonderful thing to do. But still, if realistically speaking, you don't really stand any chances to become a real scholar. Like, you're busy, you have to provide for your family, and realistically you will not become a scholar. Keep seeking knowledge, but try to find your area of contribution to Islam. The early generation, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, not all of them were scholars, but each one of them had their own contribution to Islam. Some of them, like, for example, were very good at negotiation and diplomacy. So that was their contribution to Islam. They did a wonderful job. Some people were very good in just giving da'wah. They had a very good level of knowledge, basically, which every Muslim should aspire to get. And they used that very effectively in conveying the da'wah. And the Prophet ﷺ was always using and dispatching his companions, placing them in the right place. So whatever talent you have, find out what talent you have, and try to utilize that to further the cause of Islam and to help the Muslim Ummah and to help humanity.
So Sheikh, in terms of the scholars, just touching on the scholars once again, because they are the light of the Ummah. They're the ones who are guiding the inheritors of the Prophet, the Prophethood sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How important are they, and how important is it for us to go back to them? What's their value to this Ummah?
These scholars are, as you said, the inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ. So they are the most important category in this Ummah.
SubhanAllah.
And the scholars, especially like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in Fath al-Bari, when he talks about the hadith, a very beautiful hadith narrated by Anas, when he says, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَا يَأْتِي عَلَيْكُمْ زَمَانٍ إِلَّا وَالَّذِي بَعْدَهُ شَرٌّ مِّنْهُ. No time comes except that it is worse than the time before it. So each day is worse than the day before. So some scholars,
I think we testify to that.
Obviously we can feel it. So he discussed an objection or some kind of a question by some scholars, posed by some scholars. They said, but Umar bin Abdul Aziz came after Al-Hajjaj. The days of Umar bin Abdul Aziz were better than the days of Al-Hajjaj. So this contradicts the hadith. He said no. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said no. At the time of Al-Hajjaj, the scholars of the Muslim Ummah were the companions. But at the time of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, although politically speaking, it was better than the time of Al-Hajjaj, but the scholars were the tabi'een, and the companions are better. So he said, the way we judge the level of the Ummah in terms of goodness is by its scholars. So they are the gauge. They are the key segment in our society and in each society. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ says that فَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَفَضْلِ عَلَى أَدْنَاكُمْ. The merit of the scholar among you over the general worshippers is just like my merit over the lowest among the companions.
SubhanAllah. So that's the value and that's the status of this Ummah. So in terms of our own selves, how important it is us to keep going back to the scholars to get whatever we need.
The right of the scholars upon us is what Allah said, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. If you don't know, ask the people of knowledge. That's their right. Don't think that you have the right to improvise and get the answer yourself. It's their right. And if you don't do it, or if you go to the people who are not qualified, in order to seek answers, then you are violating the right of the scholars, and you will be held accountable on the Day of Judgment for that.
Very important realization, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, look, can you give us a few examples from the Sahaba about how great they were as seekers of knowledge?
SubhanAllah, the companions actually, they struck the best examples for us in seeking knowledge, and they were so keen to learn from the Prophet ﷺ.
That zeal coming in there again, isn't it?
Obviously, how were the statements of the Prophet ﷺ recorded in total? They were totally recorded. The companions were so passionate, so keen to catch every word the Prophet ﷺ said. They recorded it, they kept it, they memorized it, they circulated it, so his sunnah was preserved. Umar ibn Khattab gives us a story which was narrated by Al-Bukhari in his Sahih. He said that I had to make a living, I had to work. So he said, I had a friend from among the Ansar. So I agreed with him that I work one day, and on that day he goes and he spends the day with the Prophet ﷺ to seek the knowledge. He brings the knowledge back. At the end of the day, he teaches me what he learned, or what he had learned. And the following day, I don't work, he goes to work. And I spend the day with the Prophet ﷺ. I bring that knowledge and I share it with him. So this is how keen they were just to seek knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ.
Sheikh, I remember one I think narration of I think it was Abu Hurairah who waited outside the house of the Prophet ﷺ. Is there a hadith there? And he waited and waited for many days.
Yes. Yeah, Abu Hurairah is just a wonderful example, because he said the reason why I memorized so many hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is that people would go around, make a living, and get food for themselves and for their families. But I was happy with being hungry all the time, and just get knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ. So he was just a special case. Abu Hurairah is a special case.
He was literally, he devoted his life, didn't he?
Yes.
To literally being with the Prophet ﷺ.
And this is why he's the greatest narrator of all times.
SubhanAllah, amazing. What about the case of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari? He was another great seeker of knowledge.
Yes, the companions, all of the companions. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, one story that happened to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari that I would like to share, because it just highlights the importance of knowledge. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was one day in the masjid after Fajr, and he saw a group of people, or groups of people, forming circles. And each circle consisted of a number of people. There was one person saying to them, say, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, just making dhikr in a new fashion. So straight he rushed to Abdullah bin Mas'ud, and he said to him, I saw something, it sounds good, but I don't know that from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And ultimately Abdullah bin Mas'ud went there and he gave them the advice. He said to them, now hold on to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. They said, our intention is good. He said, that's not enough.
So intention is not enough here.
Yeah.
That's another important point here, isn't it?
Yes, intention is not enough. It's the first step, but you have to couple that with knowledge of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and holding on to that.
So your intention for a deed can be good, but because it's not in accordance with Quran and Sunnah, it can be a deed that's not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Definitely, and this is what Abdullah bin Mas'ud said to them. He said, وَكَمْ مِن مُرِيدٍ لِلْخَيْرِ لَنْ يُصِيبَ. How many people aspire good, but they will never get it.
Okay, thank you so much, Sheikh. Pleasure having you back on the show.
Thank you very
We look
much.
forward to you joining us next time. And you, the viewers, join us again for another episode of The Ark of Noah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
There is no man more dear to me throughout the whole of history than the one who was sent as a guide, leading people from darkness to light. His message was simple and clear, that there is one God whom we must all fear, inviting people towards Allah. His name is Muhammad Mustafa.